is the student must understand themselves. And secondly, the student must understand the schools that they are applying to. Because if you don't understand either one, you might not be able to make the right connection between these schools. One of the first things I would like to talk about is the current admission trends. A lot of you will probably heard that this year the admission process is going to be harder than last year, which is harder than the year before, and et cetera, et cetera. That is very true, but this year is going to be a very special year in terms of college admissions. First thing is, Harvard and Princeton University, for those students seeking top-tier admissions, is they no longer have early admissions. What that means is that in this day and age, no student can ever say that I'm guaranteed admission to Princeton or Harvard. So everybody is still going to apply to an early decision school. Now, schools like Yale, MIT, Columbia, UPenn, with early decision, they are expecting a significant increase in the number of early applicants. How much? I'm not exactly sure. That is the factor number one. Factor number two is, this is the first year in which international students are now allowed to apply early decision. So what that means is that if you apply early decision to a school, you are not competing against just Stuyvesant students in this high school. You're not competing against students from New York. You are competing against the brightest kids in the whole world. And two countries that are sending the most amount of students overseas is India and China. And this percentage has risen by triple digits in the past 5 years. This is actually going to be very negative for Asian students in America for one reason. The number of applicants from India and China and Asia is by far a lot greater than the number of applicants from Europe. So if you look at it ethnicity-wise, it's already hard for Asians here to get into this school. This is going to make it even more competitive. A lot of parents say that the international Asian students and domestic Asian students are counted with two different percentages. That's actually not true. If you look at a school like Columbia University, they have 15% Asian student representation. That 15% includes international Asian students. It is not purely for domestic Asian students. So somehow, some way, if you're an Asian student, you will be competing against international students as well because you're under that one quota. I'm going to write out a process in which all of the colleges follow generally in selecting students. It's actually a quite complicated process, but it's also very scientific. Most colleges follow 3 steps. The first step is actually called a first reader. 第一个读 application 的人 and then there's a second reader, and then there's the admissions committee. This committee consists anywhere between 5 to 21 individuals. They have been with the school for a long time. Some colleges keep their admission officers for many years. Some colleges switch admission officers very frequently. For instance, Princeton University, their admissions committee is actually very young. They are not very old people. The average age for Princeton University's admissions committee is 28 years old. I'm 25 years old if you want to know what type of people you're dealing with. So essentially you have students or older students selecting younger students at most of these colleges. So when students apply, they should know that they should appeal to a younger crowd. They don't have to appeal for the admission officers old. And at Princeton University, this admissions committee switch every 5 years, which means that if students do they desire, etc., etc. But in this process, this first reader at a school like Columbia is actually a college student. Yeah.
两位共同主席叫我们总结一下张杰先生所讲的话。
First reader is again 是一个大学生，在哥伦比亚大学。这个大学生呢，就是从这一点你能看出来一个美国大学要的孩子和中国大学，就是我不知道这个国家可能受的是中国那边的教育，要孩子的方式是完全不一样的。中国有硬刚，考试大考，分够了你进，分不够你不进。美国大学在这一步，他们看的是什么呢？分也是硬刚，你过了这个纲，他们考虑你没有过这个 standardized 就是 SAT GPA， 他们不考虑。当一个大学考虑学生去让他们进还是不进，其实跟一个学生的 SAT 和 GPA 完全没有关系。在这一点，很多亚洲家长很难去理解，因为作为一个亚洲家长来说，在亚洲的教育是看的是硬纲，但是美国的大学有 hard criteria and soft criteria. Hard criteria is pretty much everybody knows GPA and SAT. A lot of parents ask me which one of these factors is more important. That depends on the school. 有些学校更重视 GPA， 有些学校更重视 SAT。在这一点，家长可以去every year there's a U.S. News ranking, and on that rankings they have SAT score averages and the number of kids in the top 10% of the class. In a school, let me take two schools for example. One is UPenn and the second one is Columbia. Very similar schools, but these schools have very different tastes in what they think is more important. UPenn is a school that actually focuses more on the GPA, while at Columbia, in many different ways, focus more on the SAT score. Why? Because for a school like UPenn, 93% of the students are in the top 10% of their class. For a school like Columbia, 86% of the students is in the top 10% class. What does this tell you? This tells you that UPenn cares more about the GPA than Columbia. So if you're a student, if you have very high GPA, but not such a high SAT score, this could give you a better idea of what type of schools you will have a better chance of getting into. So definitely pay attention to these statistics. But for all colleges, 一个学生的 GPA measures how hardworking that student is. The more hardworking you are, the higher your GPA. SAT, believe it or not, it is a test for a student's intellectual capability. However, in recent years, the SAT is not exactly very accurate in measuring the intelligence factor. Why? Because essentially you have students who are studying for the SAT even before they go into high school. And then you have students who study for the SAT maybe 2 months before they take the SAT. If these two students score the same score, who do you think is logically smarter?